Hello everyone, and welcome to Autocrat, Episode 6, Inventing the Horoscope. I am Cassie, and you are?
And I'm Vince.
The one who will be talking to you about today's episode while I will be asking him very important questions.
Yep, and as my co-host alluded to, we're going to be talking about the signs of the zodiac. I gather this is a topic you were quite looking forward to.
Yeah, pretty much so.
Yeah? So which stories are you most looking forward to then, or most curious about?
I'm most curious about how did it came up with thinking, that those stars had some kind of forms and that they invented the story with them,
Well, we've got a little bit on that today. I'm going to have a bit of background on the zodiac itself and then just leading into individual myths. Okay, so with that, can you name the signs of the zodiac?
Yeah, of course, I can name all of them.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
Aries, Gemini, Cancer, Taurus, which is me, so the best, of course. Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Pisces, Capricornus, and Aquarius to finish off.
Yep, those are all 12 of them, and these were introduced by a man called Cleostratus. And so what is the zodiac exactly? Well, it's a belt in the sky which the planets, the moon, and the sun all appear to travel through from the perspective of someone on the Earth. Each zodiac sign takes up 30 degrees of this entire circle, so 360 degrees in total. This belt was known about in Babylon in about 700 BCE.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to get further back even than this. It's in Seleucid astronomical records that we get the idea of 30 degrees each. As a quick aside, do you know who the Seleucids are?
The Seleucids are the people you talk about in your other podcast.
I wasn't expecting this to be a promotion, but yes, the Seleucids are a Hellenistic dynasty stemming from a man called Seleucus I. Thank you for the promo, by the way. And Seleucus was a general of Alexander the Great, so if you want to know a bit more about that, you can listen to After Alexander. Anyway, accidental promo over. We get the idea of 30 degrees for each of the zodiac signs from them, and in this period, the whole process of the zodiac becomes more mathematical and more refined. Now, I've got something interesting to share with you.
You do?
I've got the Babylonian version of the zodiac, so these are the Greek ones. We're going to be talking about the Babylonian ones a bit, or even older ones. Babylonian records contained the following. So the Pleiades, a cluster of stars we'll get to more next week, also called the hairbrush. Taurus is rewritten as Anu's bull, and Orion is the shepherd of Anu. Perseus is known as the old man. You've got Auriga as a curved sword. Gemini, who are still the twins, as per Greek mythology. Either Procyon, which is a star, or Cancer, the constellation, but the text doesn't say what this is actually about. A lion, which is either male or female, so this would correspond to Leo, which you mentioned at the start of the episode. Spica, which is a furrow. Libra, still the scales, and Scorpio, remaining unchanged. Sagittarius, who may have been an archer.
I mean, it does look like an archer.
Yeah.
Have you seen it before? That one?
I am not too familiar with the constellations by eye. I know my way around Orion and I believe Ursa Major and Minor, but I'm hard-pressed to know where the other constellations actually are without a guide. So moving on, Capricorn is the goatfish. Aquarius is said to be the big star. I didn't have any more detail about this in the text. Pisces is referred to as tails, and some Pisces and Pegasi stars come together to form the big swallow. Parts of Pisces and Andromeda come together to form Anunitum, which is a warrior goddess in Mesopotamia. She was originally an aspect of a goddess called Ishtar, but became separate with time. Finally, we have Aries, or what as the text calls him, the hireling, meaning either somebody who does largely unskilled tasks, or someone who just does work because of physical rewards.
I'm guessing some of these signs might not be in our zodiac today.
No, so we have no mention in our modern zodiac of 12 signs of Auriga or Orion, for example, as we saw at the start of the episode.
That might be because, well, some of those stars might have died out and we don't see them in our night sky anymore, do you think?
I'm not too sure. I didn't come across anything suggesting why this has changed over time, but it's something to look into. If anyone knows, you can get in touch with us at our show's email address.
We're really not astronomers.
We're really not astronomers, so if anyone knows, get in touch with us at autocratpodcast@gmail.com. We'd be very interested to hear more about that. Now, the 12 signs of our zodiac, which we introduced earlier, first show up in 419 BCE and were set out earlier than 420 BCE, so we're in the 5th century BCE. As I said, Cleostratus is key to the introduction of the zodiac, and he brought the concept of the zodiac into Greece in an instant, rather than it being a slow process of development. So I think it comes in from somewhere else rather than originating there. By contrast, the Egyptians never actually had the zodiac, and my co-host here can tell you a bit more about that.
Well, as far as I remember, they focused on a series of 36 stars, which rise and fall in session of 10 days across the calendar year, which was used as a guidance for the deceased.
Yep, exactly. Now, horoscopes don't show up before the Hellenistic era, when there's already Greek influence. Many think that the Babylonians got their traditions of the zodiac from Sumer and Akkad, and I feel like we need a bit of context about what these two terms mean, because I don't think you come across them that often.
No, I don't know what they mean.
Now, Akkad is a state in the Middle East which begins with a guy called Sargon being crowned in about 2300 BCE, and this was the first empire that the world had actually seen. For an idea of how long it lasts, there are said to be about 117 years between the reigns of Sargon and a man called Naram Sin, but it probably didn't last as long as this. Sargon himself was supposedly a cupbearer to a monarch, and he rose to become a king, so quite the promotional ladder. Apparently all the sources agree that he didn't spring from important stock. As for Akkad itself, during Naram Sin's reign, it had a killing blow administered to it, and there's chaos afterwards, so rise and fall over time. Yeah. We'll get to that in our episodes when we eventually start covering the Roman Kingdom, Republic, and Empire. There's actually a theory on it, from what I remember, by an Islamic scholar from the Middle Ages, who said that there was sort of a cyclical nature with this, that you have strong and weak states which are created by strong and weak individuals. I'd have to look into it in more detail, but just an interesting concept. Now, Naram Sin was the grandson of Sargon and the son of a man called Manish-Tushu. And there are two alternate chronologies for the length of Akkad's existence. Either it's from 2381 BCE to 2200 BCE, or 2327 to 2146 BCE. I realise that some of these numbers don't really match up, but we're not focusing on a chronology of the Middle East, this is just for a little bit of context. As for Sumer, by the 2000s BCE, there were about 12 city-states which each had kings. This includes the city of Uruk, also called Erech. Now, Uruk is notable because, in its guise of Erech, it is the home of Gilgamesh from the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Nice.
I did some digging and thought that was an interesting aside.
That might be a nice topic to cover, Gilgamesh.
Yeah, could be. From memory, the earliest story that we actually still have written origins for, or written evidence of. There's one opinion, sometimes not accepted, that the zodiac came even earlier from people in Mesopotamia, Persia, and Elam in about 4000 BCE. And it was given to the above groups, Sumer and Akkad, from there. One thought is the idea that Ursa Major is about 100,000 years old as a concept. Owen Gingerich, or Gingerich, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, hypothesized that, because we see the stars of the Dipper being connected to bears quite often across the world, we might have evidence for constellations stretching back to the Ice Age. So again, I imagine a bit like reconstructing the Indo-European mythology from its descendant mythologies, you can look at the constellations as they are now and think, well, there's a lot of commonality across different groups. It must have existed in a similar form way back in the past. So that's a bit of context on the zodiac out of the way. How do you feel about transitioning to talk about some of the myths?
Yeah, definitely. We're starting with Aries then.
Yep.
Aries is, if memory serves, the flying ram with the golden fleece who saved Phrixus and Hel from being sacrificed to Zeus.
Yes, as my co-host says, a flying ram who saves two individuals who I didn't really look into the genealogy of from being sacrificed to Zeus. Now, the ram was going to bring them safely to a place called Colchis, but Hel, or Heli, not sure how you say that, it's Helle by the way, fell and drowned. This drowning is actually the origin of the word Hellespont, you know that strait of water around about where Istanbul is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's where that comes from. A lot of these myths seem to be big fans of explaining names through other names. Phrixus, by contrast, arrived safely and offered the ram to Zeus. Phrixus married the daughter of Colchis' king and brought the fleece of the ram to him. The fleece would stay, tied to an oak and protected by a dragon, until Jason and his Argonauts came along to try and find it. So you've heard of the Argonauts? And their quest for the golden fleece?
No.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in a few episodes' time then, I assume. I haven't thought out a comprehensive schedule, but it's quite a big story, so I assume we'll get to it. But this is where that golden fleece comes from. Now, next up, we've got Taurus, and apparently these were a group of sisters called the Hyades. Zeus loved them, I assume in a platonic way, because they were nurses for his son Dionysus. These sisters had a brother who died to a lion out hunting. and they killed themselves out of sadness, and Zeus put them in the sky as the constellation Taurus.
That's sad.
It is sad. Some of these myths do have quite sad undertones to them, but I suppose not every myth can be full of jollity. Now, in terms of the bovine form, Zeus would later follow suit himself. He kidnapped Europa, the spellbinding daughter of the king of Phoenicia, while disguised as a bull and took her to Crete. Europe gets its name from this individual, Europa, and Zeus stayed up in the sky in bull form. I would speculate, given that he had children with Europa, this appears to be a sort of notch on the bedpost kind of thing. As for Gemini, the fourth constellation we're going to cover, these are Castor and Pollux, twins born to Leda after Zeus slept with her.
Pollux was one that was immortal.
Yes, Pollux was immortal, but his brother Castor was not. The two were so affectionate that they wanted life and death together. However, Castor died in battle, and Pollux asked Zeus to either kill him or bring Castor back to life.
What will Zeus choose?
Well, Zeus couldn't really do this, but he told Pollux that he could alternate between living on Olympus and Hades, where Castor was. So sort of like a time-sharing kind of system.
Okay.
Zeus may have put them in the sky because of their love for each other, so this is the origin of the constellation Gemini. Now, Cancer is one of the obstacles to killing the Hydra which Heracles faced in his 12 labours, which again I assume we'll get to at some point. Hera made it a constellation after it died to being crushed by Heracles.
Our next one, Leo, is one of the animals defeated by Heracles, as is Draco.
Yep, exactly. Draco is not one of the constellations that we're going to talk about today, so we might have to come back to this if you're interested. But Leo is the Nemean lion, which is the subject of one of the 12 tasks of Heracles. Again, I'm not really going to go into detail on that now. We will presumably get to Heracles, and we'll talk about that in more detail then. As for Virgo, she may be Erigone, daughter of a man called Icarius. Alternatively, she might be Persephone when she comes out of the underworld in the spring. Now, Virgo ascends in the spring and sets in the autumn. And she's also the Roman deity Astraea. Now, as concerns Libra, there are several stories. One of these concerns a man called Adonis.
I know that guy.
Yep. Adonis comes from a union between a woman called Smyrna and her own father. Now, this is because Smyrna was cursed by Aphrodite to want him because she refused to worship Aphrodite. As far as I remember, a general motto of Greek mythology is don't make Aphrodite mad. In the same way as another motto would be Gaia will always have a prophecy for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Smyrna slept with her father for 12 nights because he didn't know it was her, which seems fairly obvious to say as a statement, but he eventually discovered her and chased after her, sword out. She prayed to the deities to turn her invisible when he was starting to catch up with her, and she was transformed into a tree. You might think that's the end of the story, right?
No, I know it's not the end of the story because I know the tree gets split and Adonis was birthed from it.
Exactly. So, by all intents and purposes, being turned into a tree should end the story, but apparently it does not. And apparently there are no fatal consequences to being born from a tree, so that's good to know for any scientist out there. Mythology, it goes against science.
Adonis is known for being very beautiful, I think.
Yes, so much so that Aphrodite took notice of how beautiful he was, took him in, and concealed him from the other deities. She then asked Persephone to take care of him. I assume it's because she's got a full-time job cursing people, presumably, so hands her over for a bit of daycare. However, when she eventually came back for him, Persephone wouldn't give him up, because, surprise, surprise, she'd fallen head over heels for him as well.
Lets you wonder how beautiful he was.
Yeah, apparently he was really something. Maybe as much as Clymene's feet, but we'll never know. This case was eventually taken to Zeus, and he ruled that each goddess would spend half the year with him, autumn and winter with Persephone, spring and summer with Aphrodite. Zeus then put Libra in the sky as a memorial of this.
Nice. Did Adonis get any say in this?
I assume he did not. Again, would Adonis be something you'd be interested in coming back to? Because I think there is more to his story eventually.
Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. Now, the Romans also linked the scales, or Libra, to Astraea, who we mentioned earlier, the goddess of justice and the child of Zeus and Themis. The Romans said that Virgo, the constellation, was Astraea, and Libra was the scales, which measured every case. Astraea actually has a legacy today in the form of the blindfolded lady used in US iconography. You know, the one holding the scales with a blindfold on?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that is apparently the Roman goddess Astraea, or the constellation Virgo.
Nice. What is our next one?
Next up is Scorpio, and do you know which story he's connected to?
Orion. Be my favorite one.
Oh, really? Well, we won't get to Orion today because he fails the test of being one of the zodiac constellations, but he does succeed at being a constellation, so tune in next week to find out more about that. The gist of Scorpio's tale is that it is a half-divine scorpion that fought Orion, as sent by Gaia, at the behest of Apollo. I don't know if you followed that, because that's quite a long chain of events.
I'm sure I'll follow it at some point.
Okay, so Apollo asks Gaia to send this scorpion to fight Orion.
Why not?
This is because Artemis was supposedly in love with Orion and she was letting her divine duty slip, so everything's kind of falling by the wayside because of her distraction over a boy.
I mean, I get her.
You do?
I do.
Well, apparently that's unacceptable for her brother Apollo, and the correct proportional response is to send a scorpion after him.
I mean, brothers tend to be quite protective.
Yeah, even among deities, as it turns out. I don't have much more on that here, but we will get back to Orion, so we'll see Scorpio again at some point. Next up, we've got Sagittarius, and his identity is supposedly that of a centaur called Chiron. He was turned into a constellation by Zeus because of his selflessness, and the story here is he was accidentally hurt by one of Heracles' arrows, which had poison on them, so an arrow hit him in the leg. It was so painful that he wanted to die, but he couldn't because he was immortal. At about this same time, Prometheus asked Zeus to stop his own pain, and we'll get to Prometheus, I believe, probably sometime around episode 10 or 11, I haven't fully planned the schedule out yet. Zeus said that Prometheus could go if someone replaced him. In agony, Chiron agreed, and he was rewarded by being lifted into the sky as the constellation Sagittarius.
Because he was selfless.
Yeah. There's a different interpretation of Sagittarius, which makes him a representation of one of the two kinds of centaur. The good ones, as represented by the constellation Centaurus, and the violent ones, as shown in Sagittarius. There's a different interpretation of this story, which is that Chiron actually taught the meaning of this constellation to the Argonauts, and it was employed in navigating towards the fleece. So maybe Chiron, maybe not, but we'll go with it being Chiron for our purposes. As for Capricorn, we don't have really that clear of a picture, but it may be Pan. Do you remember from, I think, last episode or the one before, the son of Hermes?
Mm-hmm.
Now, he was quite fond of chasing after nymphs. Pan turned into a goatfish when running away from Typhon, who we talked about in episode 3, and he hid in a river until after the fight with Typhon had taken place. For his services, I assume the story we talked about in episode 3, which was the distraction after Zeus's tendons had been taken out by Typhon, he was placed in the sky as Capricorn. Now we come to Aquarius.
Aquarius was first of all Jupiter and later on became connected to Ganymede, who was rescued by Zeus and flown on a big bird to Olympus, where he served as cupbearer of the Olympians.
Yes, and we talked about Ganymede last episode when we were discussing the Galilean moons.
Is also connected to Deucalion, who survived the Great Flood and is therefore connected to water.
Yes. Alternatively, there's a connection to Aristaeus, the son of Apollo and Cyrene, who found out the dog star was causing drought because of its fury that the people of Kos were sheltering killers. Aristaeus brought the inhabitants around to execution of these people, and he prayed to Sirius, the dog star, who brought rain. So there's a lot of water theme going on in this episode, or serving drinks in Ganymede's case.
Nice.
Next up, we've got Pisces, and this is two fish, who were Eros and Aphrodite. And this again has a connection to episode 3. They turned into fish and hid in the Nile when Typhon arrived, and they were tied together with string to stop themselves from being separated in the turbulent water. Typhon stopped chasing them because he was tricked by the fact that they turned into fish and hidden from him. So there's a bit of a hiding from Typhon theme at the end of this episode.
There is. And I think that brings us to the end of the zodiac signs.
Yes, we've done all 12, and next episode we will be talking about some different constellations such as Orion and Draco, which we didn't get round to covering here because they're not zodiac signs.
Very nice. Well, I hope you really enjoyed listening to this episode. As always, you can reach us through our email address or have a look around our website. There's really cool stuff around there, and hope you have a great week, everyone.
Yeah, have a great week. As a final announcement, I am surprised to say this myself because I'm not very tech savvy, but we are on TikTok apparently.
Oh yes, we are. I haven't figured it out all the way through, but we are. If you want to have a look, it's the same handle, and give us a listen.
Yep, you can find the handle on the website autocratpodcast.wordpress.com if you're in any doubt. So as my co-host said, that's about it for today. Have a great week, everyone. So, what do you think of some of these myths?
I'm loving this. I didn't know most most of those had myth or true stories. I don't think people saw stars in the sky.